tuition and non-tuition expenses, the net price of college, and student debt. So first we'll start by looking at the tuition and non-tuition expenses combined. So more often than not, when students are asked what the cost of college is, they'll reply with the cost of tuition. But tuition is not the only cost that is associated with what you're paying for your education. So by looking at tuition and non-tuition expenses combined, this is often referred to as the total price of attendance, and this includes the price of books, housing, extra fees, food, etc. And this will be helpful for students to see this price breakdown, and especially for students at public four-year institutions like URI, a graph like this helps clearly show the way that non-tuition expenses can easily double your cost of attendance at university. And looking at something like this will help really take away the mindset that the cost of college is solely tuition. If you guys look back there at figure 2, the third one in there is, well, actually the second one in there is public four-year institutions, and if you see the cost breakdown, it's actually more than what you're paying in non-tuition expenses is more than what you're paying in just tuition. From there, we'll then go into looking at net price. So net price is usually considered net price is defined as the difference of total price of attendance minus all federal, state, and institutional and other grants. So basically your sticker price of college minus your aid, and that is your net price. And so this is usually considered the best indicator of price since it takes into account grants and aid. And it's still important that we establish total price first, looking at the tuition and non-tuition expenses, because many students are not eligible for grants and federal aid. In fact, over 60% are not. So many of them are just paying that full sticker price. But looking at net price will help show the way that cost of attendance varies by income level, and that types of universities will cost different amounts for different income levels. For example, the net price of a private nonprofit university for a low-income middle-class family is less than $1,000 greater than the net price for a public university for a high-income family. So net price is probably the value that will hit closest to home for many students, since that will be what they're closest to what they're actually paying. And this will then be the value that we'll use for comparisons to the past to show the way that costs have increased. From here, it would be good to share values and statistics, like the fact that the average net in-state tuition has increased by 58% between 1991 and 2013, and that average net tuition at private nonprofit institutions have increased by 25% since 2013. So having values and numbers like this will hopefully speak loudly to our viewers and show them the extent to which costs have increased and how high they truly are. The third thing we will then be looking at is student debt. After establishing the explicit costs with tuition and non-tuition expenses and net price, we'll then go into the costs that student debt brings about. So last year, the average amount of student loan debt per person was $35,051. And in the case of federal undergraduate student loans, direct subsidized and unsubsidized, the average interest rate was about 4.29% due to some recent student loan reform. And the average student takes about 21 years to pay back their loans. So using numbers like this, we did a very simple model, and assuming that the interest doesn't start accruing until after graduation, therefore assuming that they're subsidized loans, this simple model, if you look in the back, can show just easily the way that interest rates and time can change your cost of student debt. And for example, if you take 21 years to pay back your loans at this interest rate, 4.29%, you'll be paying $18,186.49 in interest. So your total cost of debt is then $53,234.49 relative to the $35,051, which is just your principal. So the amount you're paying in interest is over half your principal, and students need to be more educated about this, and using this same simple model, we'll do different manipulations using varying interest rate or time to really show the way that student debt can vary. So from looking at these explicit costs in our documentary, we'll then go into looking at the opportunity cost associated with college, which Ethan will now speak about.
Like Rena said, once we have expressed a good understanding of the explicit cost of going to college, we're going to move into the opportunity of cost of going to college. A lot of students in their high school year, and maybe even some students in their freshman year of college, are going to ask the question, Should they go to college or should they not go to college? So the first thing we're going to look at are some of the basic things as to why it's a good thing to go to college. Obviously, if you go to college, you have a better chance for a larger salary. This next model in the back here, the top green line indicates the salary attained at a master's degree level, which is about $60,000 to $65,000 if that's an entry-level salary, so ages 25 through 34. The center line, the red one, indicates a bachelor's degree range, which is in between $45,000 to $55,000. And the final line is that if you just obtain a high school diploma as a starting salary, you have a chance of earning $30,000 to $35,000 a year. It's clear to see that the larger your level of educational attainment, the more money you'll make right out the door. Also, you have a better chance of lifelong learning over time. You have a better chance of lifelong earnings over time. The average person who obtains a high school diploma will earn about $1.3 million over the course of his or her life. The average person that obtains a bachelor's degree will earn about $2.3 million, and the average person that earns a master's degree will earn about $2.7. Also, interestingly enough, and I think that it's important that we indicate some of the things that might not be traditionally analyzed are, if you go to college, the CDC has posted a positive correlation between going to college and longer life expectancy. For males, it's about 9.3, and for females, it's about 8.6. That's additional years onto the end of your life. Also, they have found a negative correlation between years of attainment and propensity to smoke and obesity, as well as overall heart health, but they did indicate that that could be because of the two indicating factors beforehand. Some of the things that you give up when you don't go to college. So this would be from the perspective of somebody who specifically chooses to enter the workforce after high school. One of which is the obvious one, it's the debt. So the debt is pretty large. The average debt for attaining 4 years at a four-year institution is in 2000, according to TICAS in 2004, was about $16,000, and in 2014 was about $26,000. So obviously, when you walk out the door, you don't have that debt if you go to if you stay at a high school diploma level. You also give up alternatives that might be more beneficial to you in the long run. One of which would be vocational schools. At a vocational school, you have a much more quick chance of getting a job. It's about less than a year as opposed to the 4 years that you give in school. Also, you can walk away with less debt. You also have a chance to go to community college, which can be beneficial because it can reduce the price of your overall college price, meaning there's a smoother transition, and you can take a lot of general education requirements at those community colleges, and a lot of them, like URI, have something called the JAA program where you can enroll in CCRI, take most of the credits that you need for your general ed requirements, and then transfer in for the last 2 years, which will decrease the amount of money that you overall have to spend on your education. JAA program. Also, the APA released a study that has indicated that there's a positive correlation between educational attainment and the amount of stress one feels. There's also a positive correlation between educational attainment and how much you're involved in your work, but at times like this, it might not be necessary that you're involved in your work. It might just be that you end up getting a salary that you need to survive. So after that, we're going to move into major effects.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit today about what I like to think of as the major effect. And it's a little bit of a play on words, basically trying to convey the large effect that the major that a student chooses can have on their future. And today specifically, we're going to look at some earnings and employment data. And this is just a chart here I got from the U.S. Census Bureau. And it basically breaks it down by major compared to the average of unemployment rates and earnings, median earnings for recent grads, basically 25 to 29-year-olds. So we can glean some some things from this data. Basically, if we look at certain majors, you have much better earning potential than other majors, so your investment is going to be better spent. So a strong major should have a lower unemployment rate and a higher earnings potential. So basically, you look at engineering, for example, their unemployment rate is more than 50% below the average, and their earnings is about 39% above the average. Whereas some other majors, such as psychology, they have a high unemployment rate relative to the average for other majors, and also low earnings potential. So basically, we get some mixed things from this data. Economics, for example, they have a little bit of a higher unemployment rate, but also much higher earnings, and vice versa. Agriculture has very strong employment numbers, but weaker salary numbers. So this is really more short-term data showing you what you're going to get right when you come out of school, but it's also important to look at the long-term trends in the future of what getting a degree can mean, and based on a different major. So some data from the Wall Street Journal, they reported that a petroleum engineer degree holder over the course of their lifetime can expect to earn a median income of about $4.8 million, versus a major such as early childhood education, they can only expect to earn about $1.4 million over the course of their lifetime. So that's a significant difference. And you got to keep in mind, it's not the only factor to consider when choosing a major, but it's certainly, it's a big deal, because it's probably the most tangible thing that you get from your degree is the earnings potential that you have in the employment. I mean, the ability to get a job is essential. So another study along these lines we look at from The Economist. Engineering grads, they say, can expect to earn about $1.1 million more than someone who graduates from high school. So that's significant. It definitely gives you the incentive to go to college. But if we look at another major, such as someone who majors in art, they could expect to earn about $150,000 less than high school majors. So that's pretty significant there when making the decision whether or not to attend. And like I said, it's not the only thing to consider, but it's major because it's really the tangible thing you get out of it. But we're going to go into more in our research, talk a little bit about job satisfaction, some other factors that are very important as well, because if you don't have some things, then earnings aren't everything, like I said. And now I'm going to hand it off to Brian to go a little further into it.
Now I'm going to talk about post-graduation plans and underemployment. After students graduate, they plan on using their hard-earned degrees, but unfortunately, because of the labor market, it's not as easy as they think, and that is what leads to underemployment. And then underemployment is basically when your skills aren't utilized to their full potential, or if you're working part-time and available for full-time work. So this is a big problem because in 2008, over 35% of college grads were underemployed by June of 2014, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that 44% of graduates were unemployed. And this number has been rising since 2001. This is an issue because people just come out of school and then they expect to just get work, and it doesn't work like that. The jobs that they plan on getting might not be available or open because the labor market just is not dictating that way. There are people still in their jobs and they just can't find. There's too many graduates and they can't find. So that goes over into, this chart shows the level of people who were in certain categories of work, and over, I believe, in 1992 to 2008. And note that 2008 was when the recession hit, so that's when everything dropped. And it goes, retail, waiters, and cashiering jumped as motor vehicles did as well, but those are the three that jumped significant much, an amount that it was eye-opening, where in 1992 it was the retail workers were at like 500,000 college graduates employed, and in 2008 it jumped to 1,082,000. So that's, to see 1 million college graduates working retail, it's why did they go to school in the first place? Because if they spent that time, they could have just been in managerial positions in the first place. And then that leads into the causes of underemployment. The first one would be the development of the economy, especially in times of recessions. While the employment rate for young adults was higher in 2014 than in 2010, the 2014 rate is still lower than it was in 2008 or 2000. So that just tells you that the recession that hit in 2008 was so great that we're still recovering, and even though the economy has been developing, it's still not where it was, and then our college graduates are being affected by that. The second one is the advancement of technology. As technology has been increasing, they've just been taking jobs that used in the past were available for students. So all the number jobs are being crunched, ATMs or bankers are being out. So finance jobs are being lost, and and that's coming into every major. And then the third one is the level, the employment of the labor force. And then this one is shown in this chart behind you, where it has the average age, or the median age of the labor force from 1994 to 2004, and then 2014, and then it's projected for 2024. And then as you can see, every 10 years, it's been rising. So it's gone from, I believe, 37 and all the way to about low 40s. So that number has jumped incredible. And then it's just those jobs that were open to earlier, younger students and possible employers are now, people are staying in their positions and staying where they are, and it's harder for jobs to open up because everyone is stuck in limbo. And then that goes into what's the value of a degree. And then the value of the degree depends on two things. One of them is field of study, and the other one is, field of study and, the type of degree. So because Ryan talked about field of study, I'm going to talk about the type of degree. And this chart tells you all the different degree types and what the median salary for each level was. And this is for ages 25 to 34, so it as recent grads as possible. So whatever you can get. And it obviously shows master degree, bachelor degree, college, some college, high school grad, and then high school dropout. So then this shows everything, and though more education doesn't always help, underemployment also affects these with high degrees. In 2008, 22% of people with PhDs or professional degrees were underemployed, and 59% with people with master degrees were underemployed as well. So this is it starts a logjam where the people higher up are undervalued with their great degrees, and then it hurts people with the bachelor's, and that hurts people with with some college and then high school completers. So it's like a trickle-down effect, but in the opposite way. So extra student loans make it very difficult to pay back, and that's why people stay in the same job, because they have to pay it back. And because of this logjam, it becomes even harder and harder to do so. And that's our presentation on cost and value. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna, this is Jess, and unfortunately, Rob couldn't be here with us today, but we're going to do our best to cover his section. So we're going to be talking about what determines retention rates, and this is our main question for a capstone project, and we're going to try to answer this question and try to apply it to the University of Rhode Island. So to start off, we're going to give you a sense of what our literature review is about, so what are the authors out there saying about retention rates. So we found out that it's for what determines retention rates, one of the important factors is the provision of a safety network. There were different studies and different experiments that proved that groups that actually were provided with tutoring or extra activities where they could have like study groups, or they could learn how to some study methods such as memorizing, or maybe the use of flashcards or things such as Quizlet, those students tended to had higher retention rates, and they tended to stay in college, whereas others that were not offered these resources had lower retention rates.
Okay, so access to financial aid would also affect the retention rate, as well as learning analytics in college is a program that many colleges across the country implement to keep track of students' performance in order to figure out retention rate, and also family background would affect the student retention rate. So we're going to go ahead and talk about retention rate and how to afford a college, and we're going to start talking about retention rate by race. In the back you guys can see two tables. The first one is representing first-time, full-time students who actually graduate within 4 years of the enrollment, and the second table represents students who graduate within 6 years of enrollment. So you guys can see there is a steady increment on each year and by race. So of the total of students who actually graduated within 4 years, 40% of them were white, 20% were African American, 15 Hispanic, and 58 Asian. And now we're going to go ahead and talk about how students can afford college, which is by financial aid. And what is financial aid? Financial aid is money awarded to students in order to help them afford college. And this money can come from different sources. The main one would be the US federal government, which gives away about $50 billion across the country to students, about 15 million students across the country. And they also have specific programs, let's say for a child or a spouse of a military, a deceased military family member, and also for people who have served community service. The state, if for some reason the student couldn't get the federal government help, they can also apply to the state, and they would get some kind of a student loan, grant, or scholarship. And also, the college itself, most colleges across the country do give away the, money from their own funds, and students can use it to pay for tuition fees, room and board, books, and other supplies. And of course, there's always a nonprofit or private organization where students can actually request a private loan with a low interest rate, and the requirements for this one would depend on the organization. And who can get financial aid? First of all, the basic requirements for this would be the student would have to be a US citizen and demonstrate financial need, have a social security number, and if it's a male, it would have to be enrolled in the selective services. And also would have to be enrolled in a credible college or community college, and also maintain satisfactory academic progress during their time in college. So here in the back, you guys can see the graph. Students receiving financial aid by institution. Overall, institutions from the academic year 2007-2008 received an average 80% of financial aid. In 2012-2013, the students received about 85% of financial aid. And for private nonprofit institutions, 2007-2008, they received 86% of financial aid, which went up in 2012-2013 to 89%. Public institutions received 83% at the end of 2012-2013, and for-profit institutions received 89%. So here we can see that on average, financial aid is about the same in some of the institutions, so we couldn't really tell that financial aid determines the specific retention rates. So here in the back you guys can see the type of aid received by institution. So at a private for-profit institution, the highest financial aid received was federal grant. About 74% of the students enrolled received this financial aid. At a public institution, 37% of the students received state or local grants, and private nonprofit received 81% of the students received institutional grants, and student loans were received at highest at for-profit institutions with 79%. So now Anna's going to go ahead and talk about retention rates and type of institution.
Okay, so when we first started this project, we thought retention rates, why are people dropping out of college? Our intuition just said they probably can't afford it. And then when we were playing around with the numbers, you can see in the back there's a table, and you have the retention rate by type of institution. So in the red, you can see there is nonprofit institutions, and for the green, we have for-profit institutions. So as Jess pointed out, all students are receiving the same financial aid from these institutions, yet they have very different retention rates, so we can't really argue that it's a matter of financial aid. And just a clarification, we weren't really sure what for-profit institutions were, so if this is generalizing, they're not all online universities, but it would be a good method to just assume most of them are online universities, for-profit institutions. So what are the main difference from these type of institutions? So a good example for a for-profit institution that most of you might know is Kaplan University, and then for a nonprofit institution, why not URI, because we all know which is also a public institution. So the for-profit institutions have less entrance requirements. So these programs are targeted for older adults. So if you're 30 or 40 years old trying to get an education, it wouldn't make any sense to look at your high school grades or your SATs that you took 30 years ago, because it really wouldn't show your full potential. They also provide flexible schedules. As I said, most of them are online universities, so you can kind of work at your own pace, but also some of them do have actual classrooms, but most of these classes are held during the afternoon or the evening because they understand most people have jobs that they're trying to still go while they're getting a degree. Their programs are usually focused more into real-world applications. They understand, as I just said, their applicants are older and they want to see less theory and see actually hands on the job. The ones that have actual campuses, which are really few of them, they do offer way more online classes than the nonprofit institutions. But the only problem that they might have is that their reputation hasn't been yet established. These institutions are fairly new, so they still have to prove to the real world that the degrees they're giving have a real value. So for nonprofit institutions, comparing them, we're all very familiar with them. They're the majority of institutions. They're the accredited universities, so like we've all known, they have been established and their degrees are valid. They also have very set schedules. As we're all familiar, we could have taken this class either at 4:30 or 11 o'clock, but that was it. So we all know that the schedules are flexible, but not as flexible as an online degree. They have fewer online classes, and the entrance requirements are way tougher. Students usually have to write multiple essays. They have to take the SATs, as we all know. Sometimes APs exams are also required. So this limits the amount of students that can apply to these universities. And lastly, so when we thought about for-profit institutions, the first thing that came to our mind was profit. Well, they must be more expensive. So if you look to your back, we have the tuition costs for for-profit institutions and nonprofit institutions. And if we focus on the first part, that's for 4 years, we can see that the average cost for a nonprofit institution is $35,000 a semester, whereas the average cost for a for-profit is $23,000. This is a $12,000 difference, so it actually would be more affordable to go, on average, to go to a for-profit institutions than to go to a nonprofit institution. So if they're not more expensive and they're getting the same financial aid, it must be the type of degree or the type of students that they're attracting that actually is driving the retention rates. So why do we think the retention rate is different? Well, we divided this on 3 sections. We thought it could be the level of engagement, the campus resources, and the value of the education. So for the level of engagement, their students are in a different stage of their lives. So when students are older, it might be harder for them to keep engaged with school. Some of them have families, they already have kids. So it could be hard to try to balance work, family, and a paper that's due. They also have different learning environments. An online class is way more different than an actual classroom that forces you to go and keep engaged. And there's a different level of dedication, and by this we don't mean that students who take online classes are less dedicated, we just mean that they have less time to dedicate to their studies. So obviously, if you're balancing all your other responsibilities, you're gonna have less time to actually pursue your degree, and this might lead you to not get the grades that you were expecting and potentially just drop out. Also, if we try to look at the campus resources, obviously there's going to be way more resources available if you're actually on a campus. So you have a support network such as tutoring, advisors, and also your parents. It is true that there's some students that, for example, go to URI that are older and do have jobs, but most of us are being supported by our parents, and we are held responsible by our parents. You can't just go home on break and have failed all of your classes. Whereas when you're older, yes, it is your money that you're paying for, but still, like, no one is holding you accountable. It's just you getting your degree. And lastly, the value of education. Some of the students going to these for-profits might feel that the money that they're spending on these degrees is actually not paying off and it's not worth it. Whereas when we're younger and we're trying to get a degree, we have this promise that we're going to get a job, whereas the other students already have jobs and they're already like pursuing their career.
Okay, so now we're going to go over Rob's portion of the presentation, which is retention rates and family background, and how this family background affects your performance and retention rates. So first generation versus second generation students. First generation, 1/3 of the total enrollment students are going to come from a family who never been in college before, so they are going to be first generation. They have the highest dropout rate among the other ones, and they obviously have no experience when it comes to parents having experience with college. They really don't know what to expect compared to the second generation students, where they come from families with experience. They know what they're getting themselves into. Their their dropout rate in college would be higher than the ones from the first generation family. And they come from the middle and upper higher class, so they also have higher income when it comes to going to college. So now we're going to go over the income and effects on graduation.
And if you just turn around, you'll see if you just focus on the maroon bar, you can see how the graduation rate increases as the average family income increases too. So to say that people that are more well off tend to stay in college, and as we said previously, these people tend to be second generation college students. So to wrap it up, so far from our investigations, what we have found is that most likely what determines retention rate is not the affordability of the degree, but the having a family background that's actually a family support network that's there for you, and also a campus support network. So it's the combination of both that could determine retention rates. And where we're going to go from now on, if you turn around, we have the retention rates for different universities in the region. And as you can see, URI has the lowest retention rates. So we're going to try to apply what we've learned so far to try to see why URI's retention rates are so low and try to change this.
Good.
Take the mics off.
How's it going, guys? Our final project is on online education. I'm Mike.
I'm Gio. And I'm Rich.
And unfortunately, Zach is not here with us today. So basically a breakdown of what we're going to be looking at. First of all, we're going to look at why tuition is unsustainable and the use of online education as a possible solution for this. Second, we're going to look at what is self-paced learning, and Rich is going to delve into that. Third of all, we're going to look at the comparison of online versus on-campus education. And finally, I'll end it off with MOOCs and the future of higher education. Because Zach's not here, I'm kind of going to do his portion. It's kind of a brief overview of what he's doing. So basically, his main topic is tuition is becoming too high, and it's obviously becoming unsustainable for students to pay and ultimately pay back the debt. And our belief is that the traditional college setting is dead, and that college is going to transform within the next few years to more of an online-based curriculum. So I'm going to pass it off to Rich with self-paced learning.
So, self-paced learning is defined as the offering and process in which the learner determines the pace, timing, and delivery of the content in a specific course in a specific environment. A little bit of history of self-paced learning is that it's not a new concept. It's been around for quite some time. So before dial-up and before internet connections, many students employees, employers, and other learning hopefuls or learning material that was delivered to them by mail. This allowed them to complete elevated courses from the comfort of an environment of their choosing at a time that was best for them. However, this brought upon some issues. Students found themselves overwhelmed with loads of material arriving at once, and also from slow delivery of the post office. Meanwhile, they did not have to go through tedious college registration processes, pay high tuition costs like Mike said, and for courses they didn't have to travel long distance to a college campus or institution. Throughout history, and with the assistance of technological developments, self-paced learning has transformed into a revolutionary means of educating the current and upcoming generations of student and business people of all levels. And this is because SPL, through online mediums, has been the solution to numerous issues within the classroom. So some issues that we hope to solve with SPL is that we've all been in classrooms where we can connect with the professor, connect with our fellow students, take good notes, pass the test, and walk out with a good feeling and accomplishment. On the other hand, there are those classes that you cannot say the same thing about, and those are the ones that scares us. Students pay a lot of money to receive the optimal learning experience while attending a university or institution. These are some of the following obstacles that we must overcome in our traditional classrooms. So the first is instructor delivery. The first thing to be successful in college is that you must have an instructor in front of the class that can deliver clear, robust lectures that improve learning, ignites interest, and can provide a linkage to the outside world. A poor instructor could lead to poor learning for some students. A key element in the professor's delivery is his or her tone and volume. Soft-spoken and monotone lectures decrease efficient learning as well as lowers the interest of students. Next is the note-taking eligibility. Along with lectures, professors should provide clear notes to their students to maximize their learning and something to refer back to outside of class. Poor, illegible notes will result in insufficient studying and detachment from the course content. Next, and most importantly, is the speed of lectures. Speed is the most important asset for students in courses. In understanding material, most students understand the content when it's delivered at a healthy pace. A fast-paced lecture with poor notes is a nightmare for many students. Finally, a professor must be available regularly for students for further instruction when needed. Number two would be alternative study materials. I'm a little behind right here. All right, so alternative study materials. So ASMs are any tools guided to assist students in effective learning that have not been recommended or given by the professor. So required readings are not a form of ASM because they have been given to you by your professor. But articles that you find on your own time are considered ASMs. Other ASMs include Google search engines, practice tests and quizzes, interactive assignments, audio recordings, and video lectures. As we know, as econ majors, there are also some other software that you could use. So Applia, Cengage, Pearson, Sapling, and Wiley Plus are all learning software that are committed to the development of ASMs, as well as effective learning. So many book publishers have now annexed these additional programs to their books. A con of this is the higher book prices that we all experience. However, pros of these programs are immediate feedback on assignments, flexibility of time, and ability to practice terminology and problem sets. Now for some internal factors. Strictly for our project, internal factors are classified as the dynamics that immediately alter a student's learning process. So examples of internal factors are the following. So the first is classroom climate. So classroom climate is important because it's the immediate factor of a student's learning process. Classrooms that are either too hot or too cold disable interest in topics, focus, and are extreme health factors. Most students say that they have harder times learning in a classroom that is hotter versus colder. Next is the health and well-being of other students around you. Another factor impacting students is the physical state of neighboring students. Although ill students should remain at home, ill students in class can disrupt the learning from others via constant coughing and constant sneezing. Through SPL, you can study your course material from the comfort of your own home and workplace. Next is the availability of your courses when you need them. So according to a 2014 data analysis conducted by the Complete College America, only 19% of full-time students graduate in 4 years or less, and 60% of the remaining said that they couldn't because the prerequisite was not full. Through SPL, you can have any course at your convenience when you need it. Next up are some external factors. So for our project, external factors are classified dynamics and series of events that are not associated in the classroom, but alters the learning process. Examples of external factors are commuting. This causes an issue because there's an opportunity associated when you're driving to school. The time that you travel can be used to study at home. And last but not least, the most important reason why we're promoting SPL is lifestyle demands. So in the realm of self-paced learning, the unique lifestyles and demands of each and every one of us is the biggest hurdle. There are many lifestyles that traditional college courses have a hard time becoming accustomed to. Students come from various backgrounds and walks of life that affect the when aspect of their study habits, such as student athletes, student parents, exchange students, full-time workers, and the injured and handicapped. For numerous reasons, these students will hopefully graduate, but their learning habits are not the same. And through online self-paced learning, they can all learn the same material at a unique pace and be equally successful. In order to effectively tell and measure whether or not online learning is effective, I will pass the floor over to Gio, who will further discuss the results of online learning versus traditional learning in the classroom.
So I'll be covering and comparing students' experiences between online and on-campus classes. In regards to online versus face-to-face classes, there are certain developments in computing and technology which allow growth within education and introduce methods previously unavailable to the students. However, many have preferred on-campus over online classes traditionally, but have failed to consider certain outcomes relating to that decision. Students have certain problems, concerns, and assumptions about steering away from the long-established in-class education. These problems and concerns are especially prevalent in the nursing field, where skills have historically been taught through face-to-face contact, hands-on experience and observation of tasks, and repetition of exercises. Students tend to worry about their inability to participate, incapability to access information presented in a classroom, engagement in class discussions, class material being unclear, being forced to drop the class, having a hard time making friends, and plagiarism. The study we observed collected data from 61 nursing students who shared the same material, exams, and instructor despite the different medium in which the class was undertaken. Out of the 61 nursing students, only 53 completed the course without dropping it or failing, 23 of which were on campus and 30 of which were online. It compared experiences and insights of the online and on-campus students based on results from the Student Instructional Report, version 2. This study measured appropriateness of taught material, clarity of taught material, level of support and immediacy of tutor response, engagement in class discussions, and their overall learning experience. Both groups felt that the psychiatric terminology was difficult to understand, and students wasted a lot of time simply seeing what a word meant. However, online students reported significant support from peers and class discussion boards. While the terminology didn't change, online students typically had the advantage because they were able to replay class sessions as many times as needed to if they initially misunderstood the information while on-campus students sometimes left the classroom uncertain. Tutorial support and immediacy of tutor response with on-campus students reported positive because they could access the tutor before, during, or after class. The online students reported that they appreciated the peer sharing aspect of the online class, and the feeling of being seen as important seemed to positively impact their experience. The level of engagement in class discussions varies greatly, as in-class students felt that participation was rather optional. This differed from online students, who felt obligated to contribute as their participation in class discussions and responses was assessed and graded by the professor. Feedback from the two groups of students were similar. However, on-campus students had more to say about their instructor evaluations, stating that the material was difficult and challenging, but having an instructor aided in their completion of the course. Online students greatly appreciated the responses from the instructor and tutor, despite being unable to meet face-to-face. However, one key difference between the groups was that online students felt more relieved to have completed and survived the course behind a computer screen, which requires a certain level of maturity, self-motivation, and discipline. The results of the online students, who had a higher but similar GPA at the beginning of the course, spent almost 25% more time on course material per week than their in-class counterparts. This is important to note, as online students initially felt less confident at the beginning of the course. This is likely because online students felt motivated to work harder, as they might be missing information easily attained in the on-campus classroom. We also found that online students show more satisfaction with their learning experience due to their high levels of effort and time donated toward the course. These findings are especially significant because they show how the outcomes between the two alternatives are rather similar, and in some cases dominant over one another. I'll pass off to Mike.
Okay, before I dive into MOOCs, I found some data that was kind of interesting on my topic. From 2002 to 2011, there's been a 25 percentage point increase in the students that at least take one online class throughout their college career. This kind of goes to show that students and universities are more inclined to not only give out more online classes, but students are willing to take them as well. So I thought it was like kind of a cool transition into the use of MOOCs in the college curriculum. So the arrival of MOOCs. For those who don't know what MOOCs are, they're massive open online classes. They entered in 2008 and took off on a more wide-scale use in 2012. Basically what a MOOC is, it allows mass students to take a fully online class. Its main purpose at first was you receive a certificate, but I'll explain a little more on that later. Examples of MOOCs. There are hundreds of MOOCs available for the public use online, but the three main forerunners in this industry are Udacity, created by Stanford University professors, EDX, created by Harvard and MIT professors, and Coursera, created mostly by a woman named Daphne Kohler, who earned her doctorate in computer science from the University of Stanford. Since the creation date, MOOCs have expanded much widely. In June 2014, there was reported of 2,500 online classes available to take as far as MOOCs. Since August 2013 to, like I said, June 2014, there's been a 200% increase in the availability of MOOCs and the variety of them. The main issues. Before I go into that, I kind of want to talk about the San Jose State debacle. In 2012, 2013, there was San Jose State teamed up with Udacity as an experiment to try to have their students take MOOCs as a way to earn credit. Unfortunately, it didn't go so hot. Retention rates were at an all-time low, and students who did complete the course, the average grades were extremely low. So which leads to the question, are MOOCs viable to earn credits? We know that the average price of a certificate that you can earn is around $50. Basically, what this means is if you take a MOOC on Microsoft Word, you can put down on your resume that you're efficient in Microsoft Word. But what about university credit, as most students find obviously more important than a certificate? So into the Global Freshman Academy. In fall 2016 of this year, ASU, or Arizona State, and EDX will partner for an experiment that basically combines freshman electives with the EDX online courses. So the idea is that as a freshman at Arizona State, you'll never have to step foot on campus. You can receive all your online credit, or all your freshman year credits online. And so like I said, you can basically, you don't have to go, it's not really cutting out the freshman year, but it's allowing for obviously a smaller price to pay. So the estimated price is about $200 per credit, which is actually half of what they normally charge for their online courses. The predicted total cost of your freshman year, if you enroll in Arizona State and into the Global Freshman Academy, is around $6,000. For my later project, I'm going to try to relate that to URI, but for now, if you're an in-state student and enroll in Arizona State and go into the Global Freshman Academy, you're saving around $19,000 for your freshman year, and for an out-of-state student, it's around $34,000. So you can obviously see the huge difference between them. So in conclusion, like I said before, tuition is becoming, unsustainable. We're not going to be able to afford this, and we believe as a group that the use of online education is not only the future, but a good solution to the issue of higher education.